Today we have Kathy. Kathy, we, me and Kathy, we've met each other, and she has an amazing story and a very intelligent woman. She has a podcast, which we'll talk about a little bit later on down the line. But I don't want to get too far into it. Kathy, how you doing today?
I'm doing really well. I'm so flattered by your opening comments. Thank you.
Man,
Intelligence and that just makes me happy.
it's well deserved. It's well deserved.
Thank
Like I
you.
said before, we've had a lot of conversations, a lot of great conversations, right? And it is just time to share those conversations with the audience, man, and let them take away these gems that you so kindly give me, um, and let them enjoy you.
Sounds
So,
great. Thank you, Tony, for having me.
oh man, it's a pleasure. It's an honor. Thank you for being on. So, where are
Absolutely.
you from?
Well, I live just to the east of Niagara Falls. So I'm in the city of Rochester, New York, where Eastman Kodak was born.
Nice, very nice.
Yeah,
Now, um, let's talk about your journey into the work of
sure.
what you're doing right now and get into podcasting. Tell the
Okay.
audience a little bit about that, about
Oh,
who
well, it was
you
kind of a long journey. The very first loss I suffered in my life was the loss of my father.
are.
My father died at the age of 46, and it was just after I got married, actually. I was right around 21 years old. And, I had never lost anybody like that other than grandparents when I was a toddler. And I had no memories of that because my parents always wanted to shield me from bad experiences. So I never went to the funeral home, calling hours, or anything. Losing my father, who I was very close to, just kind of blindsided me. But I don't think I'd ever even thought about grief or anything about it. So after the funeral and everything, I just moved on because, that's what everybody else was doing.
Right.
And then about a year later, I lost an infant child. I gave birth to a son, and he lived just not quite 24 hours and then died. Um, I had acquired some kind of an infection in the hospital. That was very traumatic for me, of course, because I wanted a child, and I never got to hold him or even see him.
Mhm.
So I just moved on. Then years later, working, I happened to work at a nursing home, and turned out as my mom aged, she became a resident at that nursing home, and I lost my mom, although she lived to 92. So I myself am shooting for 100. I want to make it to 100 years old. Lost my mom and went back to work, moved on. Well, then about 4.5 years ago, I lost my husband. And he had been diagnosed with a brain tumor. It was cancerous. He had served in the Vietnam War. It was thought to have been related to Agent Orange. He was actually a combat medic in the army in Vietnam, boots on the ground. And I cared for him for 8 months and lost him. And man, that just that derailed me. It derailed me. And I remember telling my daughter that I just kind of felt like I had to reinvent myself because I'd lost the person. I thought back quickly to the previous losses in my life, and I just didn't feel the same. But this one really derailed me. And in truth, it was the hardest thing I've ever gone through in my life. Um, and we married late in life. We'd only been married not quite 12 years. We found each other late in life, actually, when our kids started dating. But at any rate, at the time, I was working part time in hospice care. I was in the administrative end of it, not the hands on care. And it was the staff there, particularly one nurse, that really helped me through that period in my life. So here I was in hospice, having lost a husband, getting more comfortable about death and dying and everything. And when I left there, they asked me if I would facilitate a bereavement group, which I did. And we had 2 sessions, and then boom, COVID hit. Well, we all know what happened about COVID. Everything stopped.
Yes.
And then when things started to decline a bit, they came back to me and said, "Well, do you want to start up the bereavement group again?" And I said, I'm just not feeling the bereavement group because, well, we only had a couple people come, and it just seemed like, well, it was nice. I just wasn't giving me anything, and I wanted something that would give me something as well. And divine intervention, call it what you will, all of a sudden the word podcast floated through my head. Now, I hadn't listened to many podcasts. I certainly wasn't a subscriber of any. I don't know where the word came from, but immediately my daughter Stephanie, who was standing there, said, "Sounds great, Mom, I'll help." And
I like
6
it.
weeks later, we really knew nothing about a podcast. But 6 weeks later, we had recorded 5 episodes and launched our podcast. And actually, that was 2 years ago, tens of thousands of downloads later, and 77 countries with listeners in it. So the rest, as they say, is history. You know,
Now, do you feel that podcasting is like the outlet that you were searching for when you were trying to figure out going through the grieving process? Being because I know for me, being a podcaster, I love hearing stories. It helps me in a way of healing, but also helps me in a way of learning to be better at
absolutely.
what I do. Is
The
that
the
what you find
learning,
with it? Satisfaction?
absolutely. It really does. It gives me far more than I anticipated. And it's probably, maybe I'm being selfish, but I think it's done as much or more for me than it may be doing for listeners out there. We have a diverse set of topics that, and we've talked, I think, pretty much about any possible known to man type of therapy
Hmm.
that might help alleviate the symptoms of grief. We know there's really no cure for grief. Um, Time is about the only known thing that's going to make it any better, I suppose.
Yeah.
But we've talked about sound therapy. We've talked about all kinds of alternative modalities and treatments and everything. Vast topics. And
Mm.
I've learned from every single one of them. I have my favorites. We've done personal stories as well. There's always inspiration in personal stories. So, absolutely, it's been cathartic for me.
Hmm.
It's been educational for me. It's been inspirational for me. And I have met some of the most fascinating people. We have a different guest every week. So, absolutely, it has and is giving me what I was looking for.
Now, as a woman, I know we talked about this previously. As a
Mhm.
woman, what were some of the things that you noticed that stood out to you during the process of grieving? That was primarily different from other people, because I mean, we talked about this. People grieve
Mhm.
differently. What were some of the things
Yes.
that stood out to you that you recognized later on that was different than you did from most people?
Well, I think the big thing that I noticed, and I didn't notice it at the time,
Mm,
it wasn't until I was reflecting back on things. Somebody had made a comment to me, I think it was one of our guests, that, gosh, you'd never know that you had gone through those grief experiences
mhm.
and or that you're still grieving, because I'm the first one that says I'm going to grieve the loss of my husband for the rest of my life.
Right.
I also will grieve the other losses I've experienced, but those grief experiences are different. If anything, they're coming back to me now fresher from
Yes.
the things I've learned and talking about them. But um that's all different. But when somebody said that to me, I had to look back and think, when did it change? When did it change from feeling so devastated, so overwhelmed, to more of an attitude about, I'm moving forward, I'm going on with this? And I had to remember that, well, there was one day in particular that I said to myself, I cannot go on like this. This is not the me I want to be.
Hmm.
I don't want to be that person who doesn't want to leave the house, doesn't want to go anywhere, doesn't want to interact with people, because I love people.
Hmm.
So once I acknowledged that to myself, and I really did talk out loud, I expressed it verbally, I don't want to go on like this. Then I started to make some changes. I don't necessarily remember exactly what those changes were right away, but I got myself out more. I remember going for a pedicure. That was pretty exciting to me. I hadn't had one in a while. Um, and then just, I got back to work and everything, interacting with people again, and just kind of put myself back out there. I did not and have not yet, though, even though, how people ask you those stupid questions. When are you going to date
Yeah.
again? I have not dated again. Um, I haven't really been interested. Maybe a little more lately. I don't know. But anyway, um, but I think it was that conscious thought and expressing it to myself, that intention that
Mhm.
I am not going to go on like this.
Right.
I still have the rest of my life to live, and I'm not going to live it like this. That was the big thing I can really think of. But it's so hard to get out there. It's so hard when you're by yourself.
Mm.
And my husband and I had had two dogs. A year almost to the day after he died, I had to have one dog put down. And then the following year, the second one. Then I felt really alone because I think it was the last thing that we had had together
Right.
that I could always look at the dog and think of him and remember him. The dog was gone. So I didn't want to get another dog. Too much to take care of. And I do like to travel. So I didn't want to pay the kennel bill all the time. So I got a bird. Yeah,
You got a
yes,
bird.
I got a bird. I like to say she was an interactive bird, though. She was a green cheek conure
Okay.
and hand trained, hand raised, and she was even almost potty trained um, for a while. I don't have her at this time because my living situation changed. Um, but she was the person I would talk to when I was home alone sometimes, and she would share my breakfast and things like that.
Nice.
Still company. So I never lost that desire, I think, for somebody to talk to. And I remember I would get a phone call in the morning or something, and people would say, "Kathy, are you sick? You're getting a cold? Your voice is all scratchy." I said, "It's because I haven't talked to anybody in 24 hours,
Right. Right.
um, that if you don't use your voice, it tends to get a little gravelly." But yeah, I think those are the things. It's the isolation is really tough, and it takes a lot to
Yeah.
motivate yourself to fix that. And as well, when you decide you're going to make some changes,
Hmm.
it takes some serious introspection, I think, because you have to first figure out what it is you want and then
Hmm.
what you need to do to get there.
Yeah.
So,
I
yeah.
definitely agree.
Yeah.
What was some of the self-care tips? Well, what was some of the self-care steps that you've taken to actually help aid you in your walk as you're going through the grieving process and becoming more of who you are, comfortable about talking about these things? Because we talked about, most people lay on the couch, right? And
Yeah.
not want to get up. Some people do, like myself, I've isolated. The grieving process looks totally different.
Hmm.
And the self-care tips were totally different as well. What were
Yeah.
some of the steps that you've taken for our self-care?
Well, I think I was very fortunate in that although I lived by myself, my older daughter, Stephanie, was only 10 miles away. And she's got two boys, one which is very active in athletics.
Mm.
So I don't like to miss his soccer games. So that would always very eagerly get me out of the house.
Okay.
But also, I was very fortunate that I worked for a facility that was a hospice home
Hmm.
because the staff there are very comfortable talking about things like death and dying
Okay.
and grief and grieving. And they made sure, especially one or two of the nurses, they made sure to really kind of watch over me. And they would purposely, as I recall, come in and ask me questions that might prompt a memory. So
Mm.
they would get me talking about it. I realize not everyone has that. They don't have
Right.
hospice
Yeah.
workers, people that know, what you might need when you're grieving. You might need to, well, if nothing else, gosh, you need to hear their name. And I know
Yes.
there's a quote somewhere that
Yes.
as long as you speak their name, they will not die or they'll
Yes.
never really be gone. And that was important for me. Um, and friends and family that would would bring those memories back.
Mhm.
My husband was a veteran and belonged to a local group, the Vietnam Veterans of America local
Okay.
chapter. And for a long time, I had been the editor of their newsletter. So I was very comfortable going to their meetings because I knew everyone. And that was also another place. So I guess I sought out places and people that I knew would support me and that would be happy to see me. Um, yeah,
I can definitely see that because hospice, I've talked to a lot of hospice workers. I love talking with them because it's like we all speak the same language, right? Um,
right.
and believe it or not, a lot of hospice workers that I find were women. So,
Hmm.
when I used to go down during COVID, when everything was just a mess, I would sit outside the building with clients and stuff while their loved ones were passing away for the most part.
Hmm.
And
Right.
I just remember the hospice workers used to come out there and they used to grab the guy and go, "Is there anything that we can get you?" And everything.
Yeah.
This is a hard moment. So I love the way that they used to show up. I
Yeah.
used to love that. And they just everything was just so natural. And I thought to myself, like, I want to be like that. I want to be able to talk like that one day, right? And
Hmm.
so listening to them and how they interact, it was just a
Yeah.
beautiful thing because it was like they knew how to um, walk with you.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's so different from where I started because, and I've told this story on my podcast, but when my mother was aging, I have just one brother, and at the time he lived in Florida. So I was the only one here for
Mm.
my mom. And my mother was the inveterate planner. She planned everything to the most minute detail. So it was really no surprise to us kids that she had not only planned her funeral,
Mm.
and she didn't have any chronic illness really except arthritis. But I mean, she didn't have cancer or anything. But she had planned her funeral. She had picked out and paid for her coffin. She had paid for the entire funeral and even had the program agenda identified where
Wow.
she wanted what she wanted done.
Hmm.
That was so she would like to talk to us about it. Well, since my brother was in Florida, she wanted to talk to me and tell me about it and tell me where all her papers were and everything. I was so terrified, Tony, of the word death
Mm.
that I literally would make excuses to not have that conversation with her.
Yeah.
So to go from that, being terrified of the word death, to the level of comfort I have now discussing it
Hmm.
is amazing, and I can only credit the hospice nurses that I worked with.
See, I like that.
Yeah,
'Cause I didn't have anyone to talk to me about it. Like
yeah,
when I experienced all of mine, um, it was like everyone left me.
yeah,
It's like everyone left me, so I didn't have anyone to have those conversations with. Yeah, and don't get me wrong, not everyone left me. I did have a handful of friends that stood around that
right,
walked with me as I figured, as I started to learn about this journey
right.
and things like that, because I never thought I was be doing this,
Hmm.
and but I found that a lot of people didn't know how to approach me, right?
Right.
Because I was the one that everybody was always used to coming to and going,
Hmm.
I have a problem, I'm going to talk
Yeah,
to Tony and this, that, another. And
yeah,
I think when everything happened, my language changed towards everyone because, like you said, I didn't have anyone to teach me, so I had to learn,
sure.
and I had to
Yeah.
learn by watching other people because I was so afraid of going up and going, I heard that you lost a child. I heard that you lost your parents
Hmm.
or anything like that because I'm trying to get info. I'm trying to get
Hmm.
insight into, am I doing this the right way? And I
Right,
think that was a huge, huge thing. I didn't know what I was doing, right? But lo and behold, things started making sense and had that one moment where it's like someone opened up a book and I was starting to read that book that was already
right,
there and I couldn't tell you where it came from. So with my language changing with everyone, I didn't know if there was anybody out there that I could talk to because I thought I was going crazy. I was like, "What?
yeah,
Are you kidding me right now? Like this makes sense to me,
yeah,
like." What do you mean I have to deal with childhood trauma? Okay, I got to deal. And I found that grief was that door that opened it up. And
Yeah.
so once that door opened up, yes, my language was different, but then,
Hmm.
like you said, got into podcasting, and I realized that I was surrounding myself with people that spoke the same language as me,
Right.
right? And I think anytime you have a profession that you're in, I think it's important to be able to communicate in that language. And
Definitely.
I didn't realize that at first. I
Yeah.
really didn't.
Yeah. Definitely. Yeah. It's, and now there seems to be a trend that we're trying to make death more comfortable topic
Right.
for discussion. And, there are numerous podcasts popping up now to discuss
Yes.
grief in all different formats.
Yes.
And there are far more books out there now
Yes.
about grief, a lot of personal stories, and a lot of, well, self help books for those going through grief. Some I find are helpful and some maybe not so much, but
Right.
I think I've read dozens of them, I'll tell you that. I can't say that I've read all that there are because I keep finding new ones.
Yes.
But and people now consider me too as a resource for books. So, I want to give my friend a book. What book do you think I should give her? Or, there's a child who just lost a parent. What book do you think they might read to help them?
Hmm.
So I try to be that resource for people as well. But I think death is becoming a lot more of a normal topic for discussion.
Yes.
And I
Yeah.
hope that makes people less afraid of it. And I hope it makes people be more open to supporting people that might be grieving so
Yeah.
that we don't have to feel like we're living in the closet. Boy, that's a switch, isn't it?
It is.
Generations ago, it was
Yeah.
sex that was in the closet. Now that's on the table and death is in the closet.
It's like we traded one and put the other one in there. It's like we got to deal with this, but we're gonna have to put this one over here. Like, no, let's bring this one back out the closet, right? And
Yeah.
I agree totally about what you just said. There, since I've been doing this, when I first started this, there wasn't too many men out there, and the
No.
men that were out there, they were disappearing. So
Yeah.
imagine a man in the world of grief, and I'm on social media, I'm watching all the women up there, and I'm going,
Yeah.
okay, I'm going to try my best to try
Yeah.
to, you know, I'm gonna try something. That's pretty much what I
Yeah.
was doing. I was like, I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm going to try it anyway.
Yeah.
And in the beginning, everybody just kind of looked at me. It was like, who is this guy?
Yeah.
What's this thing that he's talking about? These men grieving. And there was women that came up. I was like, oh my God, there's a men's
Yeah.
resources out here. And
Hmm.
I realized that when I did try to reach out to them, they were still kind of standoffish because here I am, a new organization, right? And I'm
Yeah.
a man,
Yeah.
and we're used to seeing more women. So we used to always go, we like what you do, we love what you're doing. We
Hmm.
just don't know what you're doing.
Yeah. We just haven't decided what it is yet.
Yeah, we just haven't decided what it is yet. I was like, well, it's plain and simple. I'm going to do grief support. I'm going to provide grief support for men. They were like, yeah,
Right.
we get that. We just don't know how you're going to do it. And so many people, like people that at the churches and things like that, they were like, hey, this may not work. So many people have come before you
Right.
and have failed.
Right.
So this may
Right.
not work, but don't be discouraged. It may just
Mhm.
turn you into a different direction. And I was,
Right.
yeah, no, I'm not about to do that.
No.
And they go, what do you mean? I said, it's in my heart. I can't let it go. And I know for a
Yeah.
fact that it's going to have to work, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because for one, what I was searching for, I was, like being a man, I wanted to talk to women, but I didn't know how to, right?
Hmm.
Because I didn't know what they were going to say about me.
Hmm.
And so I wanted to surround myself with other men, but then now here the downside to that, you don't know what they're going to say to me neither, right? You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Because we are aggressive in the way that we talk. But
Hmm.
the one thing that actually helped was that masculine energy,
Right.
being able to match that energy and coming back and going, look, I mean, no harm to you. I
Yeah.
have very good. What do you mean? You mean no harm to you? Don't bust you up and you try to harm me. Like, no,
Yeah.
I'm not trying to harm you. I'm just saying
Yeah.
I come in peace, right? You
Yeah.
know, And most of the guys were like, you're going to leave in pieces. I'm like, no, I'm not going to leave in pieces, but we can talk about
Yeah.
it. Okay.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
my approach was a lot different, being in this world. And now, like you said, there's, when I first started podcasting, there wasn't too many grief podcasts out there,
Yeah.
and I wanted to do that in a way to be able to, again, have those conversations, but
Right.
showcase those men who have gone through it. So
Yeah.
other people and other men can connect and be able to go, you know what, that sounds just like me.
Yeah. It
I
will
want to
help
know more.
people feel that
Right,
they're not alone in their grief,
right.
because you do feel that way at
I
first.
did. Yes.
And I think sometimes I hate to use the word stupid, but that's kind of what they are. Stupid things that people say to you don't help. Um,
Yes.
they
It,
just
it
make you
doesn't.
feel more like you're alone and that nobody understands what you're going through.
That's very true. One thing I did realize though, the things that people used to say to me used to get to me so bad because I'm going, how did you really compare losing a cat to losing a child?
Yeah.
And it used to baffle me. And I wanted to go off and go, it's not the same thing. It's not the same.
Yeah.
I've had people, compare losing a job to losing a parent or a significant. It was like it was
Yeah.
just the same thing. No, it's not the same thing. But
No, it's not.
it's not. And one thing I learned was not to take people personal.
Yeah.
Not to take the things that they were saying personal, because it came around to me. They're
Mhm.
saying what they're saying because they're trying to relate to you. They don't mean anything by it.
Right.
But do they
Right.
think about the things that they're saying? No, because in
Yeah.
their mind, they want to show you that you're not by yourself by the best way that they can.
Right.
And so once I started to understand that, it helped me navigate that world a little bit better. So
Yeah.
when people used to come up to me and go, man, I heard that you lost your father and your parents and things like that, and I just lost, I just lost a dog. I
Hmm.
just look at him and go, yeah, like, uh, I get that. I get
Yeah.
that. And the reason why I say that I get it, because when he said it, I realized that that dog was his family.
Hmm.
Now, in my mind, does it compare? In my mind, no.
Not at all.
But
Right.
in his mind, that pet was his family member, so he
Yeah.
can relate to me. And so I began to entertain the idea, like, where's this really going?
Yeah.
Does it really make sense, that someone would do that? Because like you said, that punch in the gut, right? And I had to
Yeah.
stop a few people, like, look, I'm going to stop you right now, because if you say anything else, I may get upset with you. And I
Right.
don't want
Yeah.
to, but I need to understand where you're coming from, so I'm not taking it personally. Well, I didn't mean it
Right.
this way. This is how, okay. Now that we have that
Yeah.
communication down pat, I find that a lot of people do that as well.
Yeah.
They don't know how to communicate.
Right. Well,
So,
and I know everybody feels they have to say something, and they
yes,
can't just hug you. They have to say something in your ear.
yeah.
And I found that one of the most comfortable things I can say to someone is to give them a hug and say, "This shouldn't have happened." And that's all.
Mm, I like
This
that.
shouldn't have happened.
I like that. Yeah, I do.
You know?
I didn't say that to one of the guys,
Right.
but I said something similar. And
Right.
then I had to catch myself, because I realized that when I said it, he was like, well, it happened. So I
Right.
realized that he was on the defensive end with me. And so I had to back
Right.
a little bit and go, okay, what did I say to trick? Oh, this is what I said.
Hmm.
And I said
Yeah.
something similar, like, man, I'm so sorry that this happened. This shouldn't
Yeah.
happen to you, because this man lost two of his sons to an overdose, right?
Right.
Pretty much a year apart from each other, right?
Right.
And so this man I was like, man, that should have never happened. And he was
Yeah.
like, I was like, whoa, hold on.
Yeah.
Let me
Yeah.
just back up a little bit, because I
Yeah.
should have never said that. And then so when I backed up, I said, look, I've known both of your sons, and I am so sorry that this happened to you.
Yeah.
I'm not going to tell you that it's going to be okay, but I will tell you that I will walk with you as long as you let me,
Yeah.
and we'll figure it out together.
Right.
Because losing two kids, I know what it's like to lose one,
Right.
and that's hard enough. Now losing
Sure.
two, you double that amount on
Yep.
that pain that's going
Yeah.
on. And after a while, we was able to sit down and have a conversation and understand where each other was coming from. We were both
Mhm.
saying the same things. We was
Yep.
just perceiving it and taking it in, receiving it in different
Right.
ways. You know,
Right.
you ever had that happen to you where someone takes something in and perceive it in a different way, then you have
Oh,
to try
absolutely.
to figure
Sure.
out how to correct it?
Yeah. But a lot of times people won't say anything.
Mm,
They'll just get annoyed that this is what someone said.
right.
Um, and they won't try to stop and think about it. They won't try to think to themselves. They just felt they had to say something, and this was the only words that came to their mind.
Hmm.
Um, or they won't think, well, maybe they didn't mean that. They'll just assume
Right.
that, that was just blurted out. But when people ask me, I say, well, that's what I would recommend, saying something like, this shouldn't have happened,
Right.
or I'm sorry this happened.
Right. Right.
Because what that does is, first of all, it acknowledges that you understand that something horrible happened to them
Hmm.
and that you feel bad that it did happen to them. And that's really all you're trying to convey to them.
Right.
I know if it's someone who has lost a child, I try to say, I don't believe it was ever intended for a parent to outlive their children.
Yes.
You
I can
know,
relate to that.
and again, it's a way to acknowledge that you know what happened and it just wasn't fair,
Hmm. You know?
and you accept that as well. But
Yeah.
it's so hard, and the people, we just generally aren't comfortable with silence either. It's really enough just to give someone a hug.
Yes.
That's
That
all.
that
Just a
touch.
hug.
That
Maybe a little
touch.
bit longer than a normal hello hug. Maybe a
Yes.
little bit longer, a little bit stronger. Let them know that you've got them, you know.
Yes.
Um,
Yeah.
you
You
don't
know,
have to say anything.
the first time that happened to me, I didn't know how to take it. I really didn't know how to take it, right? Because as a
Yeah.
man, we're taught certain things, you know what I'm saying? If a woman hugs you longer than X amount of time, she's
Right,
interested in you, right? Or
right,
things like that.
right.
So let's keep it brief, move back, you go,
Hmm.
you stay right
Yeah.
here, I'm gonna stay right here, right? And then we can
Uh-huh.
have that conversation. So
Right.
the first time that it happened to me, I became nervous.
Yeah.
Because I didn't, I
I can
hadn't gotten
understand
into
that.
this field,
Yeah. Yeah.
and someone came up to me and they was just like, you know what, just come here, just give me a hug.
Yeah.
And she held me and I was
Yeah.
holding her and I was trying to back up, like I was trying to, okay, enough, 3 seconds is
Yeah.
enough, right? And
Yeah.
then she was
Time's
like, oh,
up.
no, no, no. And she pulled me closer and just held me.
Yeah.
And I was so nervous, but it felt so good in the same sense. Like, wow, I actually feel like someone gets it, right?
Right.
But in the same sense, I'm like, I don't know how to take this. And
Hmm.
I'm not sure what to do from this point on. And so
Right.
as time went on, I realized what you had just said, just a
Right.
little longer hug,
Yeah.
that little tighter squeeze that you're giving me.
Hmm.
It's
Yeah.
showing me that you are empathetic about what I'm going through,
Right.
right?
Right. Yeah.
Because I
And
didn't, I
yeah.
struggled with it.
And I think the other thing you can do is, maybe it's somebody you don't know well enough for a hug. So maybe it's a coworker or something. So maybe you reach
Mhm.
your hand out to shake their hand. When you take their hand, put your other hand on top so that you have both hands around their hand.
Mhm.
That's just also another subtle way to let somebody know that this is more than just a, hi, how are you?
Right,
You know,
right.
because with both hands holding theirs, again, you've got them. You've got them.
I didn't do that because I think I would got punched out from most of the men that I've interacted with. You know what I'm saying? Like
Well, you
grab
do
your
have
hand,
to kind of gauge your
yeah,
audience. I
kind of gauge it
agree.
a little bit, right? So what I found that would happen, and I wouldn't recommend people doing it unless you're comfortable with the person that you're with. Uh,
Right.
I used to grab them by the hand, and when they did, I just opened up the other hand and just pull them into me,
Oh,
and
yeah.
then I would grab them, right? And
Right.
do you know how many men that I've had just melt on me
Oh, sure.
because of,
I
and
bet.
I didn't know. I
Yeah.
didn't know that that's what they needed, right? I just felt
Yeah.
natural to me, like, oh man, come here, because when bro
Yeah.
hugs, right? Bro hug, there we go. But when I started grabbing these men's hands and everything, it was just like,
Yeah.
man, just hug them, something inside of you is like, just hug them,
Yeah.
let them feel your heartbeat, you know?
Yeah.
And so I did, and I started doing that. And these guys would just be like, man, I'm so glad that somebody here
But
that
yeah.
understands.
Yeah.
So we talked about the differences between men and women, you
Yeah.
know, on your podcast. And that's one of the things I wanted to put out there too.
Yeah.
Men do that. When it comes down to women, we misunderstand the language,
Yeah.
because normally when we're doing, you know, when we're interacting with women like that, we
Mhm.
normally have another arterial motive. You know
Yeah.
what I'm saying? Oh, she likes me. Oh,
Yeah.
I got
Yeah.
10 seconds now, 15 seconds.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, you know, it tends to play on your mind.
That's
And that's,
right.
man, that's the first, most men, that's the first thing that we think about. Oh, she's interested.
Right.
She's not
Right.
really, she don't really want to hear what I have to say. She wants
Mhm.
something different.
Right.
And so I've had to tell other men, like, hey, get that out of your head. That's not what she's
Mhm.
there for. You know,
Yeah.
she's there
Well,
because she
tell a
cares
man that
about us.
they can take a woman's hand and just put their other hand on top.
Yeah,
That's a way of not hugging a woman, but it's just letting that woman know that you've got got 'em.
yeah. And see, I struggle. I still struggle with that, because I've
Yeah.
tried that with women. And
Okay.
what women do with me is that they trauma bond with me.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
and so I keep a distance when it comes down to it. Like whenever I get females that come in, they know that I work with men. I
Yeah.
constantly go, hey, you know what? I want to set you up with a female that would be better suited to be able to speak with you, uh,
Right.
and provide you what you need. And
Uh-huh.
they go to them and come right back. Oh, you know what? I just didn't feel comfortable with it. And so it
Yeah.
puts me in a situation to where, I have to remind them, you're going to tell me
Right.
things about yourself that you normally don't.
Right.
You're going to go real
Right.
personal with me. And I need you to understand that it's part of the process. I don't mean nothing by it. There's nothing that's going to happen.
Right.
Boundaries,
Right.
please don't cross them.
Yep.
Yeah, I think I'm going to stick with men.
It's your charisma, Tony.
I like to say that too. Um, but somebody's going to have to explain this to me.
I know. No, I get it. But
Somebody's
I
going to
think
have to
sometimes
explain this to me, because it's
yeah,
not
yeah.
working out for me too well. Okay.
I think it's your charm and your charisma. No, you're just so genuine. I can understand how a woman might feel that they relate to you better. But I think your sense to find a female to work with them is probably the best choice.
Yeah. Well, I never want to take advantage of anyone.
Yeah. Yeah.
As a male grief worker, I get it. I
Yeah.
finally started getting it the last couple of years. I started getting it. And it was
Yeah.
like, okay, I get it. Um, you're in a moment of vulnerability, and I
Yeah.
hold space with you. And
Yeah.
that's my promise to anyone that ever reaches out to me. If you reach
For
out to me,
sure.
male or female, even though I don't
Yeah.
consult with women,
Yeah.
I will hold that space for you.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
will hold that space for you. I would give you everything that you need to be able to
Mhm.
communicate, to be able to feel as if you're validated, feel as if someone's listening to you,
Mhm.
and to be able to help you protect your heart,
Yeah.
and I think with the line kind of goes over or kind of get blurred when you do that, because I realize women communicate through their emotions,
Mhm.
and that's the
Mhm.
difference, and I get
Yeah.
that. And so I tell them,
Yeah.
say, hey, this is a very emotional moment in your life.
Mhm.
These are the things that you're going to go through.
Yeah.
I'm going to try to keep you from trauma bonding with me, but I can't help
Yeah.
that. But if you do,
Right.
I can take steps to help you get back to being
Right.
independent,
Yeah.
but these are the boundaries. And
Yeah.
it's like, why do I even put up boundaries sometimes?
Well, so just tell the women that want you to work with them that there are so few male grief counselors that you need to save all of your time slots for men that may need your help.
Yes. You know what it is? I don't want to miss a phone call from
Well,
someone who
exactly.
needs me,
Exactly.
and so therefore I think that's where my compassion comes from,
Yeah.
because too many times I've not picked up the phone because I was busy doing other things, and then have to
Right.
get the news later on that someone
You want to
so and so
remain available.
overdosed.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah.
So and that's where, and I mean nothing by it. And that's why I try to
Right.
explain to these women
Yeah.
is that I would rather sit down and listen to what you're going through than to get a
Right.
phone call saying that you committed suicide or that you overdosed,
Exactly.
you know.
Exactly.
And so, and that's that's where I'm at most of the time with it, you know,
Mhm.
just like I
Yeah.
just want to hold space with you. I want you to know that someone cares about you, that
Right.
someone, you know, out here understands, maybe not to the totality of what you're going through, because I can
Mhm.
never understand what you're going through because your journey is individual.
Right.
But I do understand from a person who has experienced similar things
Hmm.
and everything. And it goes back to that, it goes back to, you know, people are looking for other people to
Sure.
validate what they're going through, but not
Yeah.
understanding how to communicate, how to do it.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yep.
So, yeah. How can people find you?
Oh, I don't hide that many places. Well, they can find the, the name of my podcast is As I Live and Grieve. And we chose that name it's kind of a spin-off on the phrase as I live and breathe,
Mhm.
but we changed it to As I Live and Grieve because we believe that you're going to grieve for the rest of your life. And
Yes.
you may not necessarily grieve the loss of someone, but it could be a divorce, it could be a loss of lifestyle. Maybe you
Mhm.
lost your job, you lost your pet, but there's going to be some kind of grief in your life, whether you recognize it as grief or not. So it's As I Live and Grieve.
Very
We're
good.
on all podcast apps except Pandora. For some reason, Pandora is excessively slow in processing things. I've
Yes.
worked with them a few times. We also have a website, and it's www.asiliveandgrieve.com.
Okay.
So it's very easy, and there's a link to send us an email or something like that. But either one of those, you can reach me. You can also find me on Facebook on a personal level. It's just Kathy Gleason, and I went to the School of Hard Knocks. So
I like
those should be enough clues to help you find me.
it. There was, I got I what we got a few things up and coming.
Yep.
But tell people what's up and coming, just so they can look out for it.
Well, I belong to a number of groups on Facebook about grief and grieving, but I connected with a group that Tony runs. It's the Global Grief Network, and they are doing an amazing thing. And I say amazing, they're having a conference next spring. But the amazing part about this conference, other than the fact it deals with grief in a global status,
Mm.
because there are presenters from literally from around the world. I know of one from the Netherlands, for example, that's going to be presenting. She's a fascinating person that I met through my podcast. But this conference, it's totally virtual and it's totally free. So that to me is unheard of in social media, in, well, in any industry.
Mm.
You know, you don't do things free. And it's not only free to attendees, it's free to people who want to present. So if there are people out there listening that maybe are clinicians or therapists, or maybe you have a podcast, or maybe you have discovered the cure for grief. If you have, please reach out to me immediately.
Me
I
too.
want you to guest on my show. Yeah, no, I'll share, Tony, I'll share. Um, but for whatever, so this conference is going to be very interesting, and there'll be so many resources available.
Mm.
So you really shouldn't miss it, for many, many reasons. Other than that, there's just, I know locally in the Rochester area, I do a book group with a slant toward grief. And what we do is the books we choose are books about grief and grieving. We're just finishing up Megan Devine's book, It's Okay That You're Not Okay, or It's Okay to Not Be Okay,
Right.
which was the very first book I read after I lost my husband and helped me immensely. And next, we're going to read and discuss The Wild Edge of Sorrow by Frances Weller, who has a concept called the Five Gates of Grief. There's a podcast episode I did on that, and each gate is a different type of grief.
Okay.
One is specifically for someone that you have lost that you love. And he starts the book out very blunt by saying, everything in life that you love, you will lose. That's a pretty bold statement,
That is
but
a bold statement.
it's pretty true.
It is.
At any rate, and then another gate of grief is global grief. All the things going on in the world that are
Yes.
upsetting us, that we're grieving. Things like, COVID, or the devastation going on in the Ukraine and the war over there. Everything going on. There's a global grief. There's also a grief for things that you were never able to have. Maybe
Yes.
things you wanted in life, a dream you had, and it never came to fruition. You grieve that as well. So Francis Weller's concept is very interesting, and we're going to talk about that. That's on a local level. We've not done that virtually, although that's kind of a little seed in my brain.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe doing something like that too.
We can make it
So I
happen.
don't know. I have tons of ideas,
We
and
can make it happen.
yeah, I know we can make it happen. I know we can make it happen. So maybe I'll kick it off for the conference. Who knows? But just, people can find me, and I'll help in any way I can. Any way I can.
Definitely love that. If you had any encouraging words to tell anybody out there right now that's going through something similar, what would you have to tell them?
Well, the first thing I'd want them to know is that grief, unlike some other diagnoses, is not a terminal disease.
Right.
You're not going to die from grieving. Okay. But I do think that you have to learn, admit, learn, and find a way to live with it. It's naturally going to change over years, but
Mm-hmm.
it's going to change a lot faster if you kind of walk in the right direction, I guess is the best way I can put it.
Yeah.
If you, like happened to me, decide one day that, oh God, I don't want to live like this for the rest of my life. As soon as you hear yourself thinking that, stop yourself and say, okay, it's time. I don't want to live like this. So what do I need to do about it? And start finding some direction for yourself. Start setting some intentions for yourself and move in that direction. Be open to that moment in your grief
Mm.
where you just don't want to continue in the direction you're going, and turn it around.
That's
So I guess that's
amazing.
what I would say.
That's amazing. Well, I want to say, Kathy, thank you for being up here. We have a lot more stuff coming up. So to everyone that's going to be looking at this podcast, do me a favor, hit that subscribe button, hit the bell notification so you guys are notified every time we drop a new episode. But also be sure to check out our lives as well. Kathy has been on them. She's going to be on plenty more. We take topics and we dissect them for you, the viewer. These are live streams, so you, the audience, can ask us questions and be able to take down all these jewels and be able to connect with these resources as well. So, and that podcast is called Grief. Let's talk about it. And that is, we do that. We drop episodes twice a month. So, and they're live stream, like I said. So look forward to seeing you guys there. Let us know what you think in the comments. Contact Kathy. Her information will be down in the bio below. And until next time, thank you again for allowing us to serve you, and tell us what you think. Love you.
Thanks, Tony. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
There we go.